So let's start with where you are right now. So, what's got you most energized or creatively fired up about Wine for the People right now? What's going on with Wine for the People?
Yeah, well, it is pretty exciting. I've got a lot of things. We've kind of done some transition in the last several months, and I'm super excited for what's next. We're doing lots of pop-ups and kind of collaborations and stuff centers and things like that, and a lot more kind of traveling around, which
Okay.
has been a lot of fun. I mean, I'm based in Austin, but we right now we're mostly kind of traveling throughout Texas, but definitely you're going to be opening up to kind of in the latter part of the year, doing a lot more outside of the state. And but what we're about to do is launch a brand new brand. I make a couple of different lines of wines, and
Hmm.
so the first thing that I started making was back in 2014. It's a rosé brand. That was the first thing that I started with, and that is called Dandy Rosé, and has a still and a sparkling counterpart. Um, After that, I have another brand that's really right now kind of where I make most of my wine. It's mostly sold direct through our club, and that one's called La Valentia, and it's more boutique, smaller, really limited releases, mostly single vineyard, and really kind of digging into a little more specific sites. Um, and then I'm about to launch a brand. The name of the business has always been Wine for the People.
Hmm.
But now I'm going to launch a brand that actually with that name. So the brand will be called Wine for the People.
Oh, okay.
Um, and we're launching it in Whole Foods. And so that'll be something that I'm really excited about, kind of building a retail brand, really easily accessible. You can just reach for it, always know it's really high quality, but also just accessible in price and fun branding. And so that's something that we're about to launch in the next week or two. So
Oh, that's
I'm
really
excited
cool.
for that. Yeah.
So you live in Austin, but the winery is located in Fredericksburg, is that right?
It's in that direction. It's
Okay.
about an hour-ish west from Austin.
Okay.
And it still puts it a good like 20, 25 minutes east from Fredericksburg. But it's in that direction. And that is the area in Texas that is a big wine country area, which
Right.
if you're not here, a lot of people don't know that that exists, but it does. I was not aware of it for a very long time, but it's a crazy growing industry. It's really exciting.
So you're mostly sourcing grapes. You have contracts with some growers, and do you
Yeah, I
have
work with growers.
okay? Do you have any that you're doing yourself? Your any viticultural stuff that you're doing right around the winery, or any vineyards that you own?
I don't own vineyards. I work, and it's really probably the most common model that you'll see across the world is that a lot of, because it's just so uniquely different kinds of skills and focuses,
Yes.
that the farming, although my farming partners were very close relationships with, it's not like I just call them up at harvest time and say, I'll
Right.
take this fruit. Because the only way that I can make great quality wine is with really incredible quality fruit. And so that's a very close relationship. But I do not do the farming. I have very trusted farming partners, and they're all over the state. So we have it's a crazy huge place that is Texas, and it's a little bit large in the whole country of France. So
Hmm.
many different regions, many different climates and styles and varieties that thrive in all those different areas. So yeah, I don't do growing myself, but work very closely with all of the
Well, I
farmers.
think what you just touched on is interesting. I've heard other winemakers say this. I think it gives them a little more flexibility. Once you own grapes, you're sort of locked into that. So if
Yeah.
if there are other growers that are popping up with some kind of new varietal, and you say, oh, you know what, I'm going to take a little bit of that and just kind of try it and see how it turns out. So it gives you as a winemaker a whole lot more flexibility, in
Yeah.
your palette, your painting palette of what you're creating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. Yeah. And
You
in
know.
an emerging region like Texas, we're
Hmm.
still, it's a very large place. We're still exploring
Hmm.
what is doing the best. And we can only explore so quickly when you have an annual harvest. So, planting and waiting for things to kind of mature and come online to even start working with those newer varieties, to continue in that experimenting and researching and exploration. I think it's exciting, but yeah, there's luckily a good variety of things that I do work with, although I focus a lot on roan varieties. But
I
But yeah, it's
noticed
a
that, but I
place that
noticed you also have a little bit of your dolcetto too, which I think is really cool that you're
yeah,
in dolcetto as well. That's awesome. And
yeah.
I think I 100% agree with you. I think that an upcoming area, and I use that in quotes, but an
Hmm.
upcoming area that's still trying to sort of figure out things out. I think that's so much fun for me to explore because that's where discovery happens. And I think that largely in part in a lot of old world wine areas, you don't have that discovery anymore. It's so regimented, you kind of know what you're going to get. So
Yeah.
bouncing around to different wineries in an upcoming area like Texas is you just never know what you're going to find, which I think is a really cool thing.
Yeah, I do too. I think I really think that a lot of the future of the wine world is going to be in places that we might not already know or associate as fully established wine regions. And
Yeah.
that's so exciting. But there's so many places that, I think it's easy, coming from the business, I was in the industry a long time before I knew that there was any wine in this part of the
Hmm.
world. And, it was easy to kind of not give it a lot of attention or kind of discount it in my mind, thinking like, oh, okay, wine in Texas.
Right.
I just didn't think much about it or give it much energy. And then I kind of called myself on it and thought, well, that's really, what kind of professional am I if I just stop learning, And so I think that that's a really um, important piece as an artist, which I very much think, of my role in winemaking as an artist. And I think just, I don't know, I'd hope that just as a person in general, I keep an open mind. So I think that, going out and exploring, and I didn't necessarily
Mhm.
have high expectations, but I also thought, well, why wouldn't I just go and explore? And then, in doing that, I was incredibly blown away by some of the things happening here. And that was back in 2011 that I started kind of seeing that. So I do think that there are just some incredible places in the world that will in time be associated with some great wines.
100%. I always, I'm going to get the next question, but I do want to pay kudos with what you just said because I think it's very important and sometimes gets glossed over that the most amazing things, and I include wine in that. So we'll say the most amazing wines and amazing discoveries can happen in the most unusual places, right? That
Yeah.
all the amazing things in life are the things on the periphery, right? The shiny thing in the
Yeah.
corner of your eye. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm going to pay you a little homage because I went and did some homework and exploration on you and on the brand and all that stuff. So I did a deep dive, went down the rabbit hole, and your wines are getting some serious buzz. I mean, not just in
Yeah.
Texas, but well beyond. Um, what what is it that's resonating with your audience? What are people connecting to on that deeper level, do you think?
Um, me. You know, I think that I approach my winemaking in a very uh, traditional kind of techniques. I'm really not looking to engineer a wine. I'm looking to tell the story of a place. And my goal in my winemaking role is to um, guide it, keep it healthy, and bring it into the best expression of what it is. And in that process, I'm learning that. Now, of course, the longer you work with a vineyard site or something, then of course you have a greater intuition of what that is. But it's still my goal is not to stand in a place and say, I like this kind of wine, I'm going to make this kind of wine. Whatever I can get out here, I'm going to, kind of get it to this already kind of predetermined idea that I have. So I think that any kind of approach in winemaking that's really about telling the story of that
Hmm.
comes from just a very traditional place, because that's really why we have, the well-known regions that we do associated with different flavors and styles and that uniqueness. And it's not, um, I think there's just something very honest about that. And I do think that also with kind of, changes in what people are looking for, I do think that also that clarity in that expression, as well as then how you get to that place, which is, wine is food. I preach that a lot because it's, 5 to 15% of it is converted to alcohol, but we are very much talking about food, and how you make it and what you use in making it is incredibly important. And I think people are more and more in tune with that, and caring about that process and what it looks like. And
100%.
so I think, yeah, I think it's that. I think also, it's you see people represented in the wine industry that, are not typically the most common people that you see reflected back from the wine industry. I think that that's also something that it draws people in. And I think that my goal, is just to, whatever I'm doing, for that to be an invitation for more and more people to be part of the conversation, whether that's in production, and we need more and more voices to know even like what is the potential of the wines that we can make in the world everywhere, not just here where I'm doing it. But if we don't have more voices doing it, then we're only seeing a limited view. And so I think that that's a important part. And then just also just in the kind of a space of just people enjoying, and I think if you're just out looking to explore wine and kind of see what's out there, and it can feel like a really exclusive club, and I have no interest in kind of forwarding that kind of idea. I just think it's for everyone, and come in and you can. I always talk about it as like it's like a train, and you can get off at any stop if you're happy with, like, great, I found something I like. That's exciting. Great, you can get off at that stop. If you want to continue on, you know, myself and plenty of other people will, we can go on to subsoils and everything else,
Mhm.
but it's really about, kind of that expectation. I think that people feel somehow that they need to already know something about wine in order to enjoy it, or that they have to learn some secret language. And it's just, I think that all that's just really unnecessarily complicated and, um, exclusionary.
I I love a lot of what you just said. First of all, I want to let you know, in all honesty, I'm going to steal the train analogy because I really like that. So I'm definitely going to steal
Yeah,
that.
feel free.
Um, but I think people get what you just said. I think they get it. Maybe not even on a conscious level, but I think that truth and honesty and that shines through because that deeper level that I just mentioned is very evident in your brand and it carries through. I don't know if you realize that or not, but
Hmm.
from this side, looking at that, you built this brand, right? Wine for the people. It's what you just touched on was authenticity. It is rooted in authenticity and inclusivity and has this beautiful, honest human tone. Okay. And everything that you put out, it's smart, but what you just said, it's never snobby. It's always approachable um, from any education level or palette style or anything like that. And that I think resonates through. You've done that with a brand. Was that by design when you went in to do the brand, or is that something that just evolved?
Very much by design.
Okay.
I didn't grow up around wine. I was not exposed to it from a young age. I was introduced to it as a young adult. I played music, which meant that I paid the bills by working in restaurants. And then over time, that the study of food and wine became a serious part of my life. And
Mm-hmm.
that really then kind of also transitioned to restaurants that had much bigger wine lists and things where I really needed to expand my education in it. And I was excited to. So that really, think in that process, every bit of it is so intimidating. I mean, everything. And then certainly as I then was going through more formal courses and study, it does not stop. And um, I think that there's this kind of feel or sense with a lot of people that once they do start learning about wine, it's almost like they have the few things that they learned, and it's like they just hold on to them like it's this, like this hold in a storm kind of a situation where it's, I get it, because it's like you feel like you have to know something. But
Mm-hmm.
it's also, the longer I'm in this, and I've been in it a while now, I mean, the more I realize there's so much I don't know. And I lean into that part because to me
Mm-hmm.
that's the most interesting part. But I think that what I hope, and very much by design have always wanted to do, is just keep it like an open invitation. And that I just didn't feel was and or enough places in the wine world that I was really finding. So I wanted to start just creating some of those myself. And
Mhm.
when I started Wine for the People, it was before I was producing wine. It was I was doing like I was building restaurant lists and educating people in the industry, but like in the restaurant industry, but also I started doing classes and things like that because I really wanted, I thought with that name, it seems, it's like a democratization of wine in some way. It's like, this
Yes,
is, I think, it's families and agriculture. And I just don't see any other more basic way of humans to, um, have a fundamental connection.
Mhm.
I'm not from a rural area or an agricultural community, but I cannot see how, when looking at the many thousands of years history of uh, wine in human civilization, that this is not about status or kind of income status or uh, it's not the same kind of maybe especially in the US where most of these things were imports and only certain people could access them, especially the more and more um just global kind of access to a lot of wines from everywhere, and then certainly from the a lot of the regions right around us. Or I think that in that I really just want to show people that it's also for them if they want it to be. It doesn't have to be different from, I don't know, it's exploring any other kind of food or beer or anything that's around them that's connected to a place, and there's a story in that. And I think that
absolutely.
I don't I don't want that to feel somehow like it's only open to certain people.
Absolutely, and that does shine through. You
Good.
skirted over some of your history, which I found interesting. So I want to rewind a bit to that. Um, Before we get to you playing in a band, which is really cool, and that start and everything that you did there, uh, what was what's the single moment or experience that you had? And maybe you can't find one, but I want you to try to think about that. When you remember falling in love with wine, that's the first part.
Mm.
When did you fall in love with wine? And then at what point did you have that sort of transition where you realized that this is no longer just something that I enjoy, but this is something I could dedicate the rest of my life to? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean that's a big question.
I know it is. I
Yeah, how long do you have? Kidding.
know.
Um, yeah, I would say it's hard to pinpoint just a certain moment. But I would say, I can kind of pinpoint a period of time where I really started. Um, I had a couple of friends around me, strangely, who are also musicians. And one was a food writer, and one was a sommelier. And being around them, it just kind of started during this time that I was already kind of starting to go down this road of just interest and wanting to um, wanting to just learn more. And I think, and it was both food and wine. And I think in that, I was able to access some places that on my own weren't as easy to access, such as, you know, wine of a certain quality, and food of a certain quality, really. I was a broke musician and not, and I was young, and I was just doing what I wanted to do, really.
You
And
were eating and
so
drinking way above your payroll, huh?
absolutely, yeah. And so that opened my eyes to this whole other world. And I do remember very specifically a wine that I had with this friend who was a sommelier, and it was a Bandol. It was the Gros Noret, which is funny because at the time I don't even know how, looking back, I can remember what it was, other than its very kind of iconic label. But at the time, I didn't know what I was having. I do remember Bandol,
Hmm.
but the producers and things, it's funny to look back and somehow back in a memory recognize that label now and say, oh, I know exactly what it is.
That's great.
Um, but yeah, it was. I'd say that those were some of the first wines that really just I just hadn't. tasted anything like it before,
Mhm.
and it was something so just um just kind of grabbed me, and kind of pulled me in a way that I wasn't expecting. I just because I didn't really think about just tasting different flavors as having maybe that kind of effect, but I
Mhm.
was just enamored, and it was like this, it's like I need to continue taking steps toward this, whatever this is. I just want to keep going in this direction because it's showing me things that I, you know, had never experienced before. And so I found that really fascinating and appealing. But I
That's
would say it
great.
was just during that time period.
Okay, that's great. You got bitten by the bug by Bandle. That's all.
Yeah,
That's
yes,
a good
exactly.
choice. That's a sexy
Yeah.
wine. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
It's still some of my favorite wines on the planet.
Oh yeah. So incorporating what we talked about with how you got involved in winemaking. I know you because you played for a band for a while, but you also were working as a consultant, setting up some wine lists and things like that. Like you said, Wine for the People started actually before you were truly a winemaker. So
Hmm.
how did it lead from playing in a band to, okay, I'm interested in wine. Now I'm kind of making it a pseudo career. And before next thing I know, here I am I'm making wine. I have multiple brands and, what did that journey look like?
Yeah, I would say not an obvious one. I mean, from the time, when I was just kind of experiencing some of those wines that I was just talking about, that was fairly early on in my early 20s. And then I moved to Austin in '05. And I came here thinking I'd just be here for a short while. And I came to help a friend for a while, and I thought, well, I'll stay and then I'll, continue on. But I had already started kind of down this path of food and wine, and I thought, okay, well, I'm just gonna see what's here. I'll explore what I can do here in Austin. Austin at that time, because it was 2005, it's been a while. Austin has grown incredibly. This city has boomed since before I got here, but for the last 20 years, it's been just nonstop. So at the time, it was still, I would say mid-sized city, and the food scene was not incredible at the time. What it is now is really remarkable, but at the time, it was still very young and not a whole lot, at least that was drawing me in.
Mhm.
Um, and so I found it a time to really just dig into my study. And I just I really just kind of put my head down and obsessively studied. I took a position in a place where they had a cool wine selection, but it was a mess. It was just all over the place. Nothing was organized, and so during this study, I said to the owners of the place, I just said, will you just give me free reign to take over like, just do what I want with your wine selection? And they said, yeah. So I thought, well, this is perfect because I'm able to taste with reps all the time. I'm tasting a
Mhm.
good 100 wines a week. I'm, posting up uh, like pictures, like maps of different countries and the regions and organizing the whole wine shelves and everything from that. So it was a complete immersion during that time where I really could focus on that. And so I did my WSET advanced. I was studying during that time for that, and that was actually the first certification that I did was the level 3 WSET, and that during that time of study, uh, it was just really intense and it was all consuming, and that was just what I had decided to do. And it was, kind of like I just put myself in
Mhm.
school. And so it was an independent study, but also again I had the resources to really kind of add to that study in a way that I wouldn't have been able to if I was just stuck in a class. So I from there, at that time they didn't give a WSET exams here in Texas, and so It was January and I needed to go take my exam, and the options were either East Coast or West. And although I love New York, I do not care for the cold. And so I thought, if it's January, I'm going to go to Napa. And so uh, there's a place there that I ended up going and taking my test. And while I was there, my old friend from St. Louis, which is where I was, where originally from, who was the sommelier, she was then working out in Napa, and she was working actually at the time for Stag's Leap, and said, "Hey, while you're out here, come and visit me. The winery isn't open to the public, but at the end of the day, when the cellar crew is leaving, I'll bring you in and I'll show you the place." And I was like, "This is so cool."
Oh,
So
wow.
we did, and we're tasting from the barrels, and she's showing me the cellar, and I was just, again, just completely never like, oh my God. And so somehow in that visit, I knew that that was the next step, because it was not so much that I saw myself as wanting to be a winemaker at that moment. I just knew that it felt like I had been studying this half of the circle, and I really wanted to then kind of complete that. And so I thought, well, this is then the next part to study. It's production. And so how do we get to that place? And I think I'm just more of a holistic thinker. And that's, to me, like, connecting all those dots then brings you to a very different understanding of something. So that was really, uh, I took that. That was in January, and by June of that year, I'd gotten a job in Napa, moved out to Napa, and I was there for about a year. After that, I worked for a couple of wineries in Portugal, and then France, and then came back to Texas, thinking, well, this is now time to move away and go move to a wine region to continue whatever I'm doing here, you know.
Mhm.
And yeah, and so I thought I would, and then I. Um, heard that there was wine here, went out just out of curiosity, and little by little found myself in a place where I could start something of my own, without a massive amount of capital behind me, which it would have taken to do on the West Coast, which I did not have. And yeah, my friend here helped me start a tiny production in 2014 of rosé, and I made 50 cases in 2014. So it was a progression, but not one that was necessarily, like we said, I'm not expected, just kind of continue to follow, like, take steps in the direction that I just continue to kind of find more and more depth and more
Uh-huh.
interest. And yeah, it's like I just kept going in that direction. And then little by little found myself uh, in a
That's
place where I really wanted to create something of my own.
that is great. That's a great story. I love that. So when you first started making wine in Texas, did you have any I heard you mention one person did you can mention my name if you feel comfortable with that, but did you have anybody that was like your mentor that you leaned on, like, hey, I'm looking at this, what do you think about this? Or hey, could you come and taste with me? And is there someone you leaned on a little bit?
You know, um, I would say her. My friend's name was Jill, and she just had so much experience with food and wine. Um, that I was, yeah, I would say a lot of that, especially early process, in the production and things we did. Uh, I wanted um, other palettes, other objective input, and her. And then, as I was meeting a lot of winemakers here, there were definitely, you know, uh, opportunities to taste with a lot of different people,
Mhm.
learn about what was happening here, because I was definitely, an outsider for that. I didn't know what was happening. And so I actually, in 2011, was offered a position for a while at a winery here. And that was really kind of a jumping off point. So I would say that there were several people in that winery and that experience of people that I was meeting during that time that I really leaned on to just learn about what was happening here. And yeah, and really took in and soaked in a lot of what they, their experience and what they um, were sharing, and very open to share. It was a good kind of some more supportive community here of people that were excited to have more people coming into the industry.
I think you see that more in some of the younger wine regions. Maybe that's not the best term, but where there's more of a cooperative effort, where a lot of the old world wineries don't seem to be as friendly with each other. Um, and I want to touch on that a little bit because it's part of your journey as well. Because there's still that skew, that old school male dominated good old boys club kind of winery, winemaker sort of mentality. I think that you're
Yeah.
seeing more women involved in that winemaking community now more than ever, which is refreshing and great, and it should be. But you, independent person, right? Um, LGBTQ community,
Yeah. Hmm.
woman, going and making
Yeah.
wine in those areas, some of those areas, that's a little tough. I mean, I read about when you were making wine in Portugal, you were the only female and you were the only one that really didn't speak Spanish. So this is hilarious that you went and did that. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
that's crazy, borderline crazy.
That was actually in Napa.
Oh, it was okay. I
Yeah.
thought that was okay.
Yeah, which Portugal as well had its own, different challenges, but there were
But
at least a couple women in
coming
there.
from that
Yeah.
angle of all those different communities that you're a part of and those things that you are, uh, what were the moments, or were there moments that stand out to you that you felt absolutely empowered because of what you were doing? And were there moments that you felt isolated because of what you were doing or who you were? I know
Oh,
that's kind of a
for
tough
certain.
question, but yeah.
Well, just to be clear, the male-dominated old boys club is alive and well in my industry, but it is changing, and that is a good thing, and it is hopeful, and I'm very much uh, a part of that change, and hope to um, provide pathways for more of that change too.
Hmm.
But that being said, it is still you know in the very old world, the more traditional wine regions, um, I would say there is plenty of that for sure.
Hmm.
Um, I'd say though that a lot of times it was more about the familial connection and the generations, and a lot of times if there wasn't uh, you know, uh, either son that was interested in taking over the business, or maybe there wasn't a son and there was, a niece or the daughter or whoever. But it was mostly driven by the familial connections. Not that people don't go out and hire in large market, but it is much more common to see um, it be family and generations. And so, for sure, I think that um, you know it still is by large part dominated by um males, but I do think it's a really hopeful or just exciting time to see these pockets of places that really are just
Hmm.
showing a lot more influence from more than just that group. And so I think that, whether generationally or then um with that, if it is the daughter that goes out and gets the degree in enology,
Hmm.
good luck getting somebody else that's better qualified. That
Yeah.
is how that's going to go. And so I think that, some of that has changed there, but I would say, more to speak to kind of um where I am, um you know it's certainly not the stereotype that people might think of this part of the world. I would say though that I'm just a very stubborn person. I mean, if I have something in my head that I'm going to do it, and I think I
Hmm.
just don't take no for an answer. And that's not something that everyone has in them, because you don't necessarily need to fight a revolution every day, because that's an exhausting thing to do. But somehow, I really just kept to focus that I was just gonna, even in some spaces that I didn't really feel welcome, I had to try and work a lot harder just for people to really allow me to stay there.
Hmm.
But I was also determined that, I wasn't as isolating as that could be and was in the beginnings. I was determined that I wasn't going to stay that isolated. So I found ways to connect, and I found ways to um, show people that I was there not as a tourist to just kind of
Hmm.
have this experience, but I was there to learn and to, contribute. And I think that ultimately, if you can bring that across and show your commitment to that, that was at least in a lot of the situations that I was in, really proved to be the thing that I guess rang loudest in time, but it took time. And then, here in Texas, it is a younger region. To me, I like to put it in words of um, frame it in a way that we're building it now. Like we can build it differently.
Hmm.
And I think any part that I have a hand in, that's absolutely what I want to be a part of and help drive. And I love seeing that there are a lot of really amazing, strong women in this industry here that are helping define it. They don't just happen to be there. They're pushing it forward, and that's an exciting thing to see because that is, um, that's to show that we can do this here and show that a younger wine region can build it differently and show much broader influence of
Hmm.
not just this narrow part of the population. I think is I'm proud to be a part of it, but it's far beyond just me that's here pushing that forward.
No, I think that I think that there are probably a lot of mm, older old world winemaking regions that look at some of these newer upstart regions and seeing those things that are happening, and it becomes a phenotype example for them to go, well, wait a second, if they're doing this, why can't we do this? So I think those ripples in the pond resonate well beyond Texas. I think, especially now with the internet and social media, the world's become smaller. So it doesn't take a week for that news to get somewhere else. People have an eye on that and they're seeing what's going on. And I think that wind of change is definitely out there, and smaller areas, people like yourself are in areas that are kind of stirring the pot and showing that change. That resonates. And like I said, it carries through to other places, and that's wonderful. I can tell you, I can tell by just your conversations and what we're talking about here that there's a level of tenacity in your personality that I can't imagine you ever easily taking rejection or someone saying no. I can tell that you are determined. You are a determined person. That I can tell
Yeah.
that would be like, okay, it's no for now, but we're gonna find
Yeah.
a way around this. So
Like, I heard you, but that's not what's going to
that's
happen.
right. And
Yeah.
something you spoke to, which is changing that community and that thought process. So you answered this partially, but your role as a winemaker, right? So you're sort of an advocate, and maybe I don't know, maybe sort of an upstart rebel about winemakers and about changing that view of how we view and who should be a winemaker, but also you become an advocate within that LGBTQ community, which is a dual purpose, right? So uh, with one leading to the other, and obviously there's a lot of crossover there. Do you find a sense of responsibility to advocate for both of those communities? And how does one feed the other as far as advocating for both of those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that there's any one easy answer for that, other than that I think it's really important to the just representation and visibility is so important.
Hmm.
And I think that, for so many people, that when you don't see people like you in a space, you don't even necessarily open your mind to thinking of that as a possibility. It doesn't mean that it's just it's just not something that you really approach in that way. It's just
Hmm.
something that kind of happens out there. And I think that that visibility is really important, and being um, open and um, very clear about who I am,
Hmm.
and that is, you know, uh, maybe outside of what people might think of the norm. But you know, I think that it's very important in my role to try to create pathways. And so in those pathways, that's where we change, because that's where people can see someone a little different than maybe what they would naturally associate with this industry. It's not all like, wealthy men and leather chairs and wood paneled rooms. I think it's really showing just real people and people that aren't all one thing. And so I think the visibility, and then from there creating pathways where it's not just this far off kind of world to many
Hmm.
people. And in those pathways, that's where we change the industry, and that's where we are going to have greater and greater um, results, because we'll have that many more voices as a part of the choir, if you will. But I'm not sure, other than those would be the biggest things. I think just the kind of showing up and being, very unapologetically just who I am,
Hmm.
and then finding ways to bring more people into the conversation, whatever that looks like for them.
I love that analogy of pathways. I think that's so true. And being an example of that pathway, you in yourself and what you're doing, you're sort of a key to that door that opens those pathways. Because you're right. When someone goes, wow, I really like to try to maybe do this, and you look around and there's nobody else like you in there, and you think, maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I'm not supposed to be here. And you start
Yeah.
questioning and second guessing yourself, right? But if you see someone that is like you, and whatever that like you means,
Hmm.
you can transcend that to whatever you want. That now you go, huh? That if they did it, this is possible. And a person who believes it's possible, right? Some people are more confident than others. Some people need that sort of confidence of just seeing that it's possible, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think that you also touched on how, as a society, and I'm not going to get on my soapbox, but as a society, how we love to pigeonhole people, right? That
Yeah.
this person's this, so that means they're this. This person's this, so
Hmm.
that means they're this. Where when in actuality, when you become, like you said, unapologetically, I'm me, and there's no one else I can be but me, and you interact with people, and they see that, and they go, huh, well, I didn't realize this, or I didn't realize that. I
Yeah.
always One of the things I always preach, and not to go on a subject, I want to make it about you, but one of the things I always preach is hang out with people that don't look like you, don't think like you, don't act like you, don't whatever like you. And it's amazing when you start having conversations how much you can learn from each other, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
So
why things like travel are so powerful, because
abs
they change us,
yes.
they expand us. We don't, our worlds, even if we're open-minded,
Yeah.
we only have the experience that we have, and pushing that is what changes us. It really changes the world.
Yeah,
So
travel absolutely destroys any type of myopic view that you have of your world, right? Yeah,
yeah.
100%. Yeah, you really do have an amazing journey and story, and I love it. I'm so glad that we're having this conversation today. Um,
Thank you.
I'm gonna back. No, thank you. I'm gonna back it up because I want to talk a little bit about Texas, and we touched on that a couple things, but there's a bigger story here about what's going on. Um, so right now in Texas, obviously it's expanding and growing, and Texas Hill Country and some other areas, and more wineries opening. What what's the energy like right now as far as Texas wine, and what are you seeing with the evolution of where it was, where it is now, and then where it's going to be with innovation, risk taking, and inclusivity. Is that
Yeah,
playing in as well of where it was and where it's going now? So,
I definitely think so. It really is. I mean, it's a very exciting time to be in this industry, in this place,
mhm.
because like I said, we are building it now, but beyond that, people are paying attention, because although, of course, we can't speed up that annual harvest, that part we're stuck with. But what we do have, and the way that we do speed up that evolution, is by communication and education, and people going out and uh, getting experience in other wine regions, bringing that experience back. The universities here really building their viticulture and enology programs, and there are a couple of the universities here that are really doing a great job of building that. Um, and then within, the producing world, to be just exchanging information, you know, tasting together, building associations, trade associations that are supporting each other, and out in the world representing us as a whole. So people know, just, I think certain places have done that really well. I think that the Washington state is one of the best examples of it, at least domestically, where you really see as a whole them working together and bringing them as a group and as the Washington State Wineries brand that it is as a whole out into the world. And I think that we're still working on that, but we're doing more of it. And the more that we're exchanging information and seeing what farming methods work, that part alone is endless. I mean, my goodness, farming methods, and just because also the landmass that we're living, that we're exploring in this way is just enormous.
Mhm.
So that is incredibly important, and each region having some form of that for themselves, and then as a whole people coming together and learning how do we make sure that everyone is winning in this, because we can't do anything if only the producers are winning and the farmers aren't. We can't, that doesn't work. So how do we make sure that the entire ecosystem is really in balance, and how do we do it sustainably? Because you also have to look at wine generationally. There are only so many vintages that I can, or any other person can, have in their lifetime. And when you're looking at building something, you very much have to look at it in that way. So I think what we're seeing here, seeing Decanter Magazine and James Suckling and people coming in and writing harvest reports, coming in and scoring wines, tasting through really large amounts of wines, people, very consistently, looked at and interviewed by, the top publications in the industry, and really just that we're part of the larger conversation now. And that to me is exciting, because I think for a long time it can feel like there's the whole wine world, and then there's this bubble of what's happening over here. And I never have an interest in that. To me, I didn't come uh, here with just this Texas pride of I'm going to do this because this is my place, and nothing wrong with that. That's great. But I think coming from outside of that and seeing, like, I'm choosing to do this here because I 100% believe that this will be a world-class wine region on the world stage. And you can come here, and if you know where to look, you can find world-class wines being made. And certainly in any growing region, we're all still getting there. Great wine doesn't happen overnight. So there are some incredible things happening here, and I think it's just um, that part is really exciting to be a part of. And with that, really seeing more people in that conversation.
Hmm. That's awesome. I actually, we'll talk later about this, but I'm a certified wine judge, so I'd love to get out there and
Mhm.
do some Texas State wine judging as well. And I'd like to get
Yeah.
boots on the ground and visit some places out there, but that's for future. But so we talked about collaborations and some of the new things that you're doing now with that new brand that's coming out. And you've ramped up. You've started to see some of that success. So I think that as we evolve throughout our careers, we move that end line, that goal line. This is what I call success now. This is what success is going to be here. So how did first of all, um, what does success look like to you now? And how's that definition changed since you first started?
It has changed incredibly, because I just never knew that I'd be in this place.
Hmm.
But I think that that's just kind of the way this whole journey has kind of been for me, because it is. And I 100% agree that it's the goal line changes, and I'm never completely done with changing that goal line and moving that forward. Um, Now you do have to appreciate the work that you've done along the way, or you don't get to actually enjoy what you're doing. So, I do try to, really kind of step back and get a perspective sometimes. And there really are moments that even just in the 10 years, which can sound, depending on the moment, like a long time, or other times not much at all, um, to have gone from, a 50 case production to making about, with the new brand, around 3,000 cases, which again is not large.
Mhm.
My goal or idea of success is not just more is more. I really want to keep a very close um, hand on quality. For me, it's not just mass production is where it kind of loses the soul of it for me. And although I do want to, like this new brand that I'm,
Mhm.
growing, it is meant to be bigger. It has a broader presence in the market, but um, again, within a range of keeping an eye on quality,
Mhm.
because yeah, it's that is more important to me than just having, a successful brand on paper. My accountant might like that better, but
Well, there's always
but
that
yeah,
danger of loss of quality when you scale up, right? That's always one of the
yeah,
things that's kind of in the back of your head that, okay, I don't,
yeah,
I'd like to sell more wine. I like to keep the lights on. It'd be a good thing to
yeah,
pay the bills,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, I'd say I don't know. Success, I feel lucky, very, very lucky to be able to do something that I love. And so I do feel like I have to appreciate that level of success
Hmm.
of where I am. But what the end point, I don't know that, because I don't think I've ever known what that end point is, of,
And
ultimately what that is.
that's refreshing to hear you say that
Mm.
because I think that if you have an end point, then when you get there, you're staring off into the abyss, right? With after you've done it all, and you go, okay, now what? So that end
Yeah,
point is always should always be that sort of thing that's just over the horizon. That's my thought
yeah,
process. So it's refreshing
yeah.
to hear you say that. Um, I'm not done with you quite yet. If you can give me a couple more minutes, 'cause I have a
Yeah.
couple rapid fire questions I want to ask you. These are sort of quick,
Okay.
easy, kind
Yeah.
of fun things.
All right.
Your favorite wine to drink that isn't your own. I'm going to put you on the spot with some of these, by the way.
Uh, I mean,
And you can't say
uh,
Bandol because you already said that. So
champagne.
oh, great,
Yeah.
great
I
choice.
mean, yeah, champagne.
Great choice. I was going to ask you what your favorite beer was, but I wasn't sure if you drank beer or not. But I make the assumption, and this is again pigeonholing people, that all
Yeah.
winemakers drink beer.
Yeah, some more than others. I'm not a big beer drinker. However, I did start in the beer industry before I got to wine. Being from St. Louis, everything's beer.
Mhm.
But I do appreciate the taste of beer. I don't drink much of it. My favorite beer, it's a good question though. I don't, there's some local ones that I like quite a bit. There's a brewery here called St. Elmo. I really dig. They make a Kolsch that's delicious.
Oh,
Um,
our local place, I just went last night. They had a Kolsch release party. It's like super.
oh,
They only
nice.
make about 5 or 6 kegs of it. They're a very small brewery, and I know
Oh,
the owner
cool.
and stuff. And that's one of my favorite beers. I love a Kolsch. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
That's awesome. There's a brewery, a small one in St. Louis as well. And when I go back to visit, they have some of the best beer. It's called the Civil Life. And then I don't know, probably Bohemia is maybe one of
Okay,
my kind
okay.
of go-tos for like Mexican beer.
And one of the reasons why I assume is every winemaker that I've met always after a harvest or something, they'll sit down, they'll like, they
Yeah.
just drink beer. But
Yeah.
there's a winemaker for Beau Frere in Willamette Valley. And
Hmm.
gosh, his name escapes me right now, but he was Robert Parker's brother-in-law. Okay.
Oh,
So I
okay.
went there on a trip to we were doing something for Willamette Valley Wines and doing some promotional stuff. And I'm sitting there and I'm talking to the assistant winemaker, and he walks in and I'm starting to ask him questions. And we're talking, and I could tell he's a little tired. He's all disheveled and
Yeah.
dirty from being out and
Yeah.
working. But he goes, you want me to tell you what winemaking is? And I said, I would love to hear from a
Yeah.
person who's so well established, a success. I would love to hear what your philosophy on winemaking is. He goes, it's very easy. It's 70% cleaning shit, it's
Mm.
20% moving heavy shit around, and it's 10% drinking beer.
Yeah.
And then he walked
Yeah.
away, and I said, that's fantastic.
Yeah. He's right about the 70% cleaning and yeah, the heavy stuff too. But yeah, that's pretty good.
Okay, so getting back to one wine region that you're dying to visit or revisit.
Hmm. There's a lot. I would say though, I really want to go to the Swartland in South Africa.
Mm,
The Swartland specifically because it's there are a lot of things in common with parts of Texas as well. It's much lesser known than a lot of the
mhm.
other regions there, and some of the winemakers there are just doing some really, really amazing things. They have some incredibly old vines that were kind of just abandoned and they're bringing back to life.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah, that's definitely one, but I mean that's a hard thing to
So
fully
maybe
answer.
some future pinotage growing in Texas somewhere.
I don't know that my focus would be Pinotage. I'm not, there are some really great Pinotage out there. I know it suffers a poor reputation, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's just about kind of going to places and learning, and then bringing back,
Hmm.
kind of that knowledge or that experience. And some of that translates directly, and some of it is just about um, innovations that people have found how to kind of adapt to their environment, and sometimes just the inspiration of how people innovate make you look at your own environment differently. So some of it's that, but you never know. I'll never say that no to just never know. Maybe there's some pinotage.
Okay, so I know we touched on Texas wine, but and this is I'm gonna hammer you down on this one, but in one sentence, biggest misconception about Texas wine.
Oh, that it's just a bunch of country folks who don't know what they're doing.
It's great. If your winemaking style had a personality, and I think, and you've said this before, I've read some of your other interviews and read some stuff from you that you said that to understand a wine, you have to understand the winemaker's personality. And I think their personality
Mm,
does show through in that. So if your
yeah,
winemaking style had a personality, what would it be? I catered that question just for you.
that is a hard question. Goodness. I mean, my brain just goes to musicians. I don't know. I'd say maybe the a little bit of the raw that might be Neil Young, but maybe the elegance and artistic sense that is David Bowie.
That is fantastic because I love both of them. I do.
It's also aspirational. I don't know if that's exactly what comes across, but if I was to dream it up, yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, wow, I got to hear your band play. If you guys are an amalgam of those two, that'd be amazing.
It's yeah, long time ago. I don't know that we had that level of skill to get there, but certainly influenced by them.
That's great. Your proudest moment so far in your wine career?
Hmm. It's kind of hard to beat the very first wine I ever released and having it in my hands and selling it to people and that they were excited to buy it. And I was so excited to just have this uh, physical, the very first physical, like finished kind of thing that I could put into somebody's glass and show them.
That kind of I
So
really did it feeling that, hey,
yeah,
I did this. Yeah. That's
yeah, for
great.
sure. And maybe also kind of we just last year celebrated the 10th vintage, 10th anniversary of that wine,
Hmm.
of the rosé that I started with. And so that also felt in a different way, but exciting to just look back and think, wow, how did that happen? But yeah, those are
Moving,
some proud moments.
moving that goal line, 10 years,
Yeah,
making it right. That's
yeah,
awesome.
exactly.
So also, I know on your website, but um, just as a shtick, how can people get a hold of your wine? How people go, man, this rosé that she's talking about, these traditional methods of
Yeah.
making wine, or this amazing
Yeah.
dolcetto. How can people get a hold of your wine?
Yeah. Best way would be wineforthepeople.com. We ship to most states,
Hmm.
and the ones we don't ship to are really about like those states just have some kind of challenging laws to make it possible. But that would be the best and most accessible way for no matter where somebody is located. If you are in Texas, you can several different ways. You can definitely look at our website, which is wineforthepeople.com, and look at events that are happening because we're all over the state doing things. Certainly, if you're in Central Texas, we do a residency experience right now that is in the Hill Country. At a winery called William Chris Vineyards, and it's in the big barrel room. That's actually where I do all my production. So it's in the barrel room, very limited tastings, and it's a really cool kind of intimate experience where we taste from some barrels, and we also really kind of just get a really close experience of what we're doing. But that's that's if you're in this area. Certainly, you can also reserve that on the website.
Hmm.
But I think the most accessible way would be from the website, and
Okay.
we have many of the wines are available. Some are um, only available through our club, which is really the way if you want access to all of the wines that I make. Some of them are just very limited and they really go to
Hmm.
our club members. And so that club is that's the way small producers keep their lights on,
That's right.
as you say.
That's right.
But it's yeah, and then in time throughout Texas, you'll be able to find the Wine for the People brand in Whole Foods, and likely beyond that. But that'll be the easiest way that you
Hmm.
can know that you can find those. So
Yeah,
um,
I saw that barrel tasting room experience, and I'll tell you when not if, but when I get out to Texas, there's a
yeah,
couple other trips I had before that, but I'm definitely going to do that. I'll definitely reach out and we're going to do that. Thanks so much for watching. If you didn't catch it, my name is Dennis Fraley, and this is the Bottle Talk on YouTube. Subscribe to my channel and join me in exploring the world of wineries, distilleries, regions, producers, and more.